The second paper is fandom as an arena for democratic contestation from Arne Niemann and Jonas Biel from Johannes Gutenberg University Mainz, Germany.
Right. Thank you very much for having us from Arne and from myself. Today we will not present an existing paper or any final results, but instead more of an idea for research, more of a conceptualization of research and a proposal for research that we've been working on for quite some time, but have not been successful in finding any funding for it. Sometimes failing quite dramatically in securing funding for it. But still, we believe it's promising avenue of research, and we want to present our ideas and kind of gather some feedback as well on how we might improve and further develop this proposal. So in football terms, this is our game plan. We will present some context and some background, then go to the theory that we conceptualize to understand football as a site of democratic contestation, and then go further into the project proposal. First, for some background, working in prior projects, for example, the fandom project or the EU Foot project. The fandom project I was involved in myself, and the two project results in the two books that I've presented here on the right. They've shown some interesting results. For example, that football fans, and by that I mean all football fans, because we had a representative population survey, so the ordinary fan is in there somewhere. Football fans have more Europe-friendly attitudes, so they are more welcoming of European enlargement, more strongly identified with the EU. They have a more inclusive understanding of Europe. They have more cross-border contacts and solidarity across Europe. They build networks with other fans. And two results that kind of surprised us and fell outside of the scope of the project a little bit, out of the European scope, but that fans were more friendly towards migrants than non-fans, and that they had a higher appreciation for democratic rule. So more satisfaction with democracy, and slightly, but if you include other control variables, this comes out in a more pronounced manner, stronger importance of living in a democracy. So these two results are somewhat surprising because they contradict a lot of stereotypes of fans, that fans are racist or have anti-immigration attitudes, or that they are anti-democratic. And during the project, a few significant events occurred. For example, Super League projects 2021, which was an unprecedented movement against the commercialization of the game. We had the German investor protests as well in the DFL, and the picture at the bottom in the middle is one of my favorite examples where they disrupted games by driving remote-controlled toy cars on the pitch, protesting against bringing in external investment to the German Football League. Euro 2024 happened in Germany, which provided images and a feeling of European unity, of European inclusion, contrasted by the European elections a week prior, which gave rise to, or more strong support to anti-democratic, anti-European parties. And now recently the securitization protests also in Germany, just the past few weeks where fans protest policing, protest the securitization of the stadium through more strict ticketing controls and the like, stadium bans. So we have a few examples of football being a site for democratic contestation, for political participation, and this points us into the direction of seeing football as such. And the third point of departure are the various diagnoses of crisis of democracy. So things like populism, extremism, anti-democratic actors, dissatisfaction with democracy, with the state and the function of democratic systems, lack of trust in politicians, the system, and lack of legitimacy, responsiveness, erosion of democratic structures in favor of authoritarianism, and a global polling crisis, climate crisis, COVID-19, the Russian attack on Ukraine, migration governance, so the global and regional crises that we all experience. And we see a strong decline in traditional institutions, such as churches or trade unions, where citizens were usually politicized and engaged politically and acquired the skills and the knowledge to engage themselves politically. So we see a strong need to strengthen democratic engagement through unconventional means. and football might be one of them. Going to the theory, numerous theories of democracy by, for example, Pateman, Barber, conceive of democracy more broadly than just electoral or institutional. So they view almost all social spaces democratically. So spaces such as work or school or even family might be considered in a democratic way. Because in these spaces, citizens develop democratic skills and knowledge and experience. And broad, inclusive participation, not only in politics in an institutional way, but also in these social spaces, these democratic social spaces, is important for genuine democracy. They postulate a kind of self-reinforcing process of democratic participation. Through more democratization comes more participation, more skill development, more engagement. Some cultural studies approaches conceptualize work, leisure, consumption, artistic production also as a negotiation of hegemony, of power, of resistance, of political conflicts. Pop culture becomes a field of contestation between dominant and subordinate meanings, as Hall writes. Giddens conceptualizes lifestyle and leisure activities as challenging hegemonic interpretations or affirming them. So we see some kind of politicization of everyday life insofar as everyday life, or essentially apolitical spaces, reflect social conflicts, reflect discourses, and negotiate them within them. Individuals compete and contest their participation and their belonging to these spaces. And these processes are also linked to actual, strictly institutional or electoral politics, because these political skills and experiences are acquired within these social spaces. So to conceptualize this a bit further, the civic voluntarism model by Werber et al. Identifies different conditions and different factors for political participation, such as resources, time, money, and civic skills, psychological factors such as political interest or political efficacy, and recruitment, so basically social capital and social relations. And what this conceptualization contains is then also a connection to these social spaces, because civic skills are acquired in these social spaces, in these, on the first glance, apolitical spaces. Political interest is garnered in these spaces, and also recruitment might happen through these. There's a concept of political talk, or everyday political talk, that political discussions emerge in everyday situations. These cross-talk or micro-negotiations that take place in person, but also online, for example. In football fan forums, they talk politically sometimes. And all leisure phenomena lend themselves to political discussions. And these exchanges allow people to articulate, to justify, contest their views, and also to then garner experience and skills in political engagement. And research on political participation has seen a quick and broad expansion of modes and spaces of participation. So from electoral and maybe protest participation to the more expressive, creative participation, social participation, internet participation, where the key criteria aren't whether it's institutionalized, but whether it is meant politically, whether it addresses a political problem in the broadest sense, a problem of collective importance. And we see contextual factors such as political culture, institutional structures that also influence how and when citizens engage politically. Coming on to fan culture is one of the biggest social phenomena in contemporary society, at least in Western society, European society. It connects people to different origins, social classes, religions, and genders to each other. It creates strong collective identifications, such as imagined communities, and it also generates claims of moral ownership over this club or the sport. So fans feel entitled to have a say in how their sports develop, even though it might not be that way institutionally in the setup of the club. There's a strong differentiation in football fandom, so different types of fans, different modes of engaging with football, modes of consumption. There's functional differentiation between television viewers and stadium goers. And so football is a very gradual, multidimensional phenomenon. So being a fan is highly diverse. but it's also highly political because football itself is highly political in the sense that in football, there's always a discussion, always discourse about the distribution of material, immaterial resources. There are election campaigns for club presidents. There is interest representation, but also football is political in the sense that it is a site where political issues are contested, where it's instrumentalized politically or where social discourses are projected. So it's political in many aspects. So we see at least 3 topical areas where football fandom might serve as a site for contestation of democracy. So inclusion, participation, and organization. If we think that football does socialize people politically, then thinking about who participates in football, who is a fan, is important to see who becomes socialized through football in what way. We have attitude and opinion formation processes. So how do people form values, attitudes, opinions through football? How are they being politically socialized? And then we have activism in and through football. So activism within football, targeted at the football governance system, and activism that stems from football or influenced by football, but goes beyond these. It goes beyond the football system itself towards the broader political system. And we have identified at least 4 research gaps that this might close. Research as fans as a whole, I think this is why we are here. Fans are typically researched as homogeneous groups. The most salient, most violent maybe fans are being researched, but not the general fans, the normal fans. Little is known about the vast majority of football fans. The theoretical connection is usually not explicit in the sense that political science theories, such as the civic voluntarism model, which explains pretty well how and why people act politically, isn't often, or not, to my knowledge, has not been applied to football so far. There's a lack of generalizability of results. So representative surveys, large-scale comparative research. And there is still a strong focus on England or the UK because a lot of the main literature is focused on case studies from England or from the UK. So studies that focus on other countries are needed.
Yeah, thank you very much, Jonas, for providing the framing and also the rationale and also some of the conceptual background of our project, and also suggesting where we go beyond what has been done so far. I have the role now to present you some of our project proposal, which is emerging. And the overarching research question that we want to address is the one at the top here on the slide. To what extent and in what ways does football fan culture serve as an arena for democratic engagement and mobilization? And we want to operationalize, if you like, this main question by asking some specific research questions. And first, we have 2 empirical ones. The first one being who participates in football fan culture and how are belonging, membership, and participation organized, negotiated, and contested. Here, basically, we want to find out which groups are exposed to the socializing and mobilizing dynamics of fandom. The second one, to what political behaviors within and through football emerge from fan culture, and how do these relate to wider democratic participation? Here we explore the forms of participation and activism that arise in fan culture, and distinguish also between political behaviors within football, the football-related activism, if you like, and those enabled through football, the generalized activism. Then the next 2 questions are more theoretical. The third one, 3A, how can democratic engagement, participation, and mobilization in football fandom be conceptualized through theories of democratic engagement? This is a classical question of, trying to work towards a conceptual underpinning of the entire project, and elements of that Jonas might have already presented. Then 3B, how does football fan culture foster the resource space, the psychological and interpersonal antecedents of political and democratic engagement? This is basically the civic voluntarism model, and trying to look at the extent to which these three aspects of the model play out in terms of promoting skills, efficacy, and social capital. And finally, under what conditions and through which mechanisms does football fandom lead to collective political and or democratic mobilization? Here, basically, we look for the scope conditions and the opportunity structures beyond the civic, more voluntary model and the more general conditions. Then we formulated a number of hypotheses which will hopefully help you to understand in which direction we are heading. We first have some hypotheses on the individual level. The first is about inequalities. The intensity of fan participation and the modes of fan engagement vary systematically across demographic groups, with structural underrepresentation of women, LGBTQI persons, and ethnic minorities among highly engaged fans. Basically, we think that these inequalities matter because differential access shapes who benefits from political socialization through fandom. The second one is about democratic attitudes, and here we have a twofold hypothesis. First, 2A, being a football fan is positively associated with stronger support for pluralistic democratic governance and rejection of authoritarian alternatives. And B, being a football fan is positively associated with higher trust in political institutions and greater external political efficacy. That is the confidence in the responsiveness of the political system. Going on, and we actually have quite a few hypotheses. We might have to bring that eventually. It's also on the individual level. We continue with a third one, which draws on that civic voluntarism model, now also explicitly in the hypothesis 3A. Being a football fan is positively associated with the development of civic skills, such as organization, coordination, and communication. B, being a football fan is positively associated with higher internal political efficacy. That is the confidence in one's own abilities to participate in politics. And C, being a football fan is positively associated with both bonding and bridging social capital. Bonding, social capital are the close ties amongst friends and family, and bridging is the wider networks. But both are key resources for political action. Okay, 3 minutes left. So we basically have more hypotheses, as you see, not just on the individual level. We also have some hypotheses on the what we call the meso and the macro level. I will suggest maybe one on the meso level, number 6, which is basically football organizations, that's the one in green here, that encourage inclusive participation of underrepresented groups, foster stronger democratic norms and more tolerant attitudes among members. Basically, organizations open to women, LGBTQI persons, ethnic minorities, and so on, provide more pluralistic interactions, and more exclusive or homogeneous groups, we hypothesize, reinforce inequalities rather than democratic socialization. Then we also thought, what does all that mean on the country level? So this is our last hypothesis here, the one which is maybe the least refined. Here we hypothesize that the association between football fandom and democratic engagement varies across national contexts, with stronger effects in countries with robust participatory cultures and inclusive football governance structures. So cross-national differences should moderate how strongly fandom translates into democratic engagement, and the more inclusive national football models and maybe the more participatory inclusive societies should promote that. We have pre-selected 4 countries, Germany, Norway, Poland, and Spain. These are the 4 countries we use in the Fanzine project, where also Radoslav was a partner. That Jonas presented earlier briefly. We are looking for strong variation on football-related and social political dimensions. Here in the table, you see that these 4 countries differentiate substantially, also in terms of the football governance models, and also in terms of other types of political culture and so on. Finally, we have got 1 minute left. Our research design, we are looking or are intending to do a mixed methods approach, triangulating across various different methods. using the strength of each while cross-validating across them. For example, want to do some desk research, providing or setting the frame on the ground for a survey, which will look at data from the big surveys like the European Social Survey, the World Values and Surveys, Eurobarometer, looking at questions on democracy, standard questions, which we can then use to generalize or to compare that with previous studies, but also a specific football sample. Then we would like to and will also go into some interviews. And finally, we are still pondering the idea of doing some non-participant observation or doing a focus group. And finally, we have some questions for you, or basically we want to end and conclude in a rather unconventional way by pointing out where we still struggle a little bit. That's first of all, wondering whether we left something out, something important in theoretical terms. Are there any blind spots, anything missing? We also still wondering, is there any literature or typology on participatory cultures in those 4 countries or covering various countries? And finally, we wonder, are there any ideas on getting more methodological leverage or even better leverage on researching what we eventually want to do? Thank you very much, and looking forward to your questions.